Hello, Steve. My name is Steve Cowles, and I am the Technical Services Manager with AEM. Welcome to episode number 10. Today, we're going to be talking about TestPro CV100 Multifunction Cable Certifier. So we all know what certifiers are for the most part, but what is a multifunction certifier? What makes it multifunction? And why do you need multifunction? Do you not just need certification? Are there other things that you need to be thinking about? So we're going to talk about all these things. We've also got a special guest again. Lisa Schwartz is with us. Welcome, Lisa.
Good morning.
Lisa is our Director of Product Marketing at AEM. And Lisa and I will probably be doing quite a few of these together because there's a lot of things that we both make each other think about, and it helps us bring you more information, better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a slide here, and I'm going to talk about the TestPro itself and what makes it multifunction. But before I dive into that, what might make you need multifunction? So, back in the early days of cable certification, I like to say, back in the day, we were concerned mainly with pre-testing that cable. You're going to put a certifier on there, test it, and make sure that it meets certain criteria so that it's going to support your applications. As the decades have rolled on, the applications that are running over this twisted pair cabling and even fiber cabling have grown. So we've got a lot more that's depending on the cabling infrastructure. And at some point, we need to go beyond certifying the cable itself, and we may need to troubleshoot some of those applications. We may need to do additional testing to provide some value-added service for the end users to show them that, yes, the cable's certified, it's going to work great, but what else is there? What is going on? What happens when your network is hooked up and you're actually connecting devices, you're connecting PoE? We're talking a lot about intelligent buildings these days. So all these things kind of come together, and as all these technologies keep evolving, we need to have the ability in a test platform to do what we need beyond cable certification. So as these things develop, you're going to see more and more things added to a tester like the TestPro, hence the multifunction cable certifier. So right out of the gate, again, you can do Cat 3 through Cat 8 in the TestPro platform, and we'll go beyond Cat 8 because it is a 3 gigahertz test platform. So a lot of testers out there are going to be a 2 gigahertz platform, which will get you up through category 8.2. But what happens when we go beyond that? If you've got a 2 gigahertz platform, you're going to want to reinvest in something that is going to go beyond that. So with 3 gigahertz, we're ready for whatever's coming next. When it comes to a Cat 6A auto test, and you'll see one of those here in a moment, we do a Cat 6A auto test in 6 seconds. And that includes your DC resistance unbalance, pair-to-pair and in-pair, as well as TCL and ELTCTL. When you start adding all those additional parameters to some of the other testers on the market, you're going to end up right around 19-second test time in many cases. So a third of the time to run that test is pretty significant. Beyond the copper certification, you've got, of course, the single mode and multi-mode fiber, but we go beyond that. In that multifunction facet, we're also validating hybrid powered fiber. So what we're doing is we can measure the loop resistance of that hybrid powered fiber. So when you've got the fiber strands and you've got a pair of copper conductors to provide remote power for, say, a PoE device or a PoE extender, you can also test that copper pair. So not just doing an optical loss test of the fiber, but in that same auto test, we will test the integrity of that copper pair and report the resistance of that. Also, if you've got power already connected to that copper pair, you can measure the voltage in that same auto test. So again, that kind of expands into that multifunction facet of the TestPro. PoE configuration validation, we can do not just the allocated power. Basic PoE testers will tell you the allocated power. They'll tell you what pairs you're running PoE on, etc. We go beyond that and do a load test. And that load test can become part of an auto test that also includes qualification of link speeds up to 10 gig, as well as an SNR test under traffic and PoE load. So again, here we go with all these other things that we can do. Once the network's installed, you can go in and run these type of tests. And you don't have to have a separate platform to do it. That's what makes TestPro so unique. And that's why we describe it not just as a cable certifier, but a multifunction cable certifier, because it does so much more than certification. Coax testing is available for it. Single pair Ethernet is available as well. Long haul cable deployments beyond the industry standard 100 meters can be accommodated as well. In fact, you can do typically up to 1,000 meters. We can have custom limits imports. So let's say you have a customer with a legacy voice copper cabling backbone, and they want to do some testing, and they're relatively long. You can import a custom limit into the tester and allow you to test that. Because if you just use a Cat 3 or 6A or 5E or whatever from the regular list of test limits, it's going to fail because of things like length and insertion loss. So you can actually customize those limits based on what you need to test. And then we added wired and wireless network connectivity testing. So we can do things like ping and trace route and network discovery to see what IP and MAC addresses are on the network, switch detail, VLAN discovery, all these kind of things that kind of go into this same platform, which makes it that multifunction facet of the TestPro. So it is truly a multifunction cable certifier. So I'm going to minimize this, and we're going to just go on camera here. So again, actually have 3 remotes here. We're going to talk about a few different benefits of having the ability to have the display the same on both ends. So your main and your remote are identical. You've got that same display on both ends. What that means to the user initially is that, and I'm going to go back onto my camera here for a second. If Jacqueline could just switch me back on camera. What that's going to mean to the user is that you can see all of the test results on both ends of that link. So when you run your test, if you have a failure, both the person at the main and the person at the remote are able to see that. Or if you're testing by yourself, you obviously have a main on one end and a remote on the other. You can initiate and run the test while you're out at the remote. But what happens if it fails? If you just have a remote that just has an LED that tells you it fails, you have to walk all the way back to that main unit and look at the display on the main unit to see what's wrong with the cable. And then you look at it and you go, oh, the problem's on the other end. I got to go all the way back to the remote. With a dual screen, you can instantly tell which end of the cable has a problem. There's a TDR. If it's a wire map issue, you know right away. You can see where that problem is along the wire map, if it's a short or an open. If it's a crosstalk or return loss failure, you'll be able to look at the TDR trace on those and see which end of that cable the problem is on. So you can eliminate some of that excessive walking and save yourself time. And as we all know, time is money. So briefly, we'll talk a little bit about some of the adapters that we're going to see. The ones that you're going to see in the top of the tester, I've got what we call our 80-net cable adapters. I can do a channel test, which is what I'm going to show you here momentarily. But I can also do the multi-gig, the PoE, and the Ethernet network discovery. Also, we've got fiber adapters. So I've got a multi-mode fiber adapter here. We've got coax adapters. I think Lisa has an adapter there with her that is for single pair Ethernet. So we've got those as well. So SPE is coming. As I mentioned on the last show when Lisa and I were talking about this, Lisa is somewhat of a guru on this. She's gotten pretty involved in SPE, and she knows a lot about it. And we're heavily involved in the standards committees for this type of stuff. So we're very well engaged in it. And as SPE comes out, we're probably going to be having more discussions. We'll probably do a special tech talk just on SPE and have a special guest in here to talk about that. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to my units here. And Lisa, did you have any comments so far? I know I'm just running on here a bit.
No, there's one thing I wanted to highlight. It was on the slide deck, and you do not have to pull it back, Jacqueline. It was a little bit below on the slide deck, but a couple of important points on the bottom there. Both main and remote, what you think of as a main and remote, and Steve, you touched on it already, the fact that they both have full displays, but They're both full function. So we don't sell mains and remotes. We sell test platforms. You tell that test platform what you want it to be on a given day. One day you might want one to be a main and one to be a remote to do the testing that Steve is about to show you. On another day, you might be doing Wi-Fi discovery, switch detail discovery, PoE load testing. In all those cases, you're going to be testing into a switch. So rather than have a piece of hardware you spent money on sitting idle, aka the quote unquote remote, you can tell that unit, today, I'd like it to be a main. And you can independently deploy the testers to do anything where you're testing into a switch, into a network, those kinds of things. The other big benefit is what Steve is about to show you. He has assigned multiple testers to be remotes and one tester to be a main. And with that, Steve, we'll go right into your session there.
All right. So Lisa's correct. I've got two complete TestPro systems here, and each has a main and a remote. And we can see on the screen, it may be a little hard to see on camera, but it says remote right here at the top of the screen on each of these three units here. Essentially what I did is I took the main unit from the second system and I turned it into a remote. And that's very easy to do. In our settings here, we just go in and we look at our, we go into our system settings, and then we've got a thing called device type. And we go into device type and we can tell it we want it to be a main or remote. They're very easily switched back and forth, as Lisa mentioned. So I turned that one main into a remote, effectively giving me three remotes now that I can use with my main, which is off screen back over this way, and it's connected on the display here. So the display you're seeing projected into my screen here to the left of what's on camera is coming from my main unit. And as you can see, it's indicated right here that it is main. So a couple things we can do when we plug into a link, we always get a wire map right away. So if I plug in, we'll figure out. So this one is on the link I plugged into right here. So we get a live wire map. That's one of the benefits of this tester. In addition to everything else we've talked about, you get a live wire map right away. So if you have a wire map problem, you're going to know about it. You don't have to push another button. You don't have to go to a different screen. It automatically gives you a wire map as soon as it detects the other unit. So one of the things I'm going to do before running the tests, I'm going to go ahead and put this unit back on its home screen so we can actually see these things come up as we go. I'm going to go back to the home screen on my main unit here. And there are some additional settings that we can use in here. We can set the units up to auto save the result with the cable library, the cable ID library we've built into it. And we can set it to auto start when they detect each other. So it will allow us to go ahead and just have the units see each other and start that test and go ahead and save the test. So it'll go through it a little more quickly. So what I'll do is I'll run a quick demonstration here, and I'm going to just plug into my first link, and we see that that's the remote that is connected to the other end of this. They detect each other. We get the live wire map come up on the screen. We've initiated an auto test, and it's already saving that test. I can now move to the next jack, and I'm going to connect. And once they see each other, we'll go ahead and start another auto test. And then when that auto test is complete, it'll save. And then I'll go ahead and go to my third one.
So Steve, give the setup here. So the testers are in the remotes are all in the closet, and you're walking around the office area with the main.
It could be either way. So you could have these remotes plugged into the network outlets. If you're by yourself, you might go plug these in at the outlets, or you plug all three of them in back at the closet, and then you go from network outlet to network outlet. And you'll know because you see that everything comes up on the remote. So you see what's going on the remote. You'll know when it's completed its test, and then you can move on to the next one. Another scenario might be where you've got one technician in the closet and you've got multiple technicians roaming the job site. Say you've got a lot of tests to do and you want to get through it quickly. I'm the technician in the closet because I don't feel like walking all day long. I just want to sit here and plug from port to port.
It's like the elf on the shelf.
Yeah, like the elf on the shelf.
In the closet.
Exactly. And then so I'm going to sit in the closet, and I've got 3 other techs that have these 3 remotes, and they're going to roam from network outlet to network outlet, and they've got an assignment. They know which specific order they're going in, and I'm just going to go on this patch panel from the first port all the way to the last port, and however many panels I've got, I'm going to plug in. It's going to initiate that auto test. It's going to save it. I'm going to move to the next one. There's already a tech sitting there with a tester. It's going to run it. Every 6 seconds, I'm running a test and just moving from port to port. Meanwhile, out at those wall plates, these 3 techs are leapfrogging each other through the job. So every port I move to, there's already a tester plugged into it because these guys are leapfrogging each other. Once they see the test is complete on their end, they know they can unplug and move on to their next assigned jack. So they just keep roaming the job, leapfrogging each other through the job. And before you know it, we've just gone through and run a bunch of tests. And I'm going to go ahead and hook up to this one again. We're going to run another quick test here. And I will show you another one of the benefits I talked about having the main and the remote be identical, being able to see problems. So in this case, this cable failed. And we can go to the details screen. We see we've got crosstalk and return loss issues. So we can go to this details tab here. And I can scroll down and I can look. Yeah, I can see my return loss. 1 and 2 seem to be the worst case. I can see my crosstalk, 3645 or worst case. This is good information, but what the technician in the field is typically going to want to know as well is, where is that located at? So these RL locators and next locators are TDR traces. So we can see in this case, I've got a return loss problem at the far end here. I've got a much bigger spike at the far end. If I go to my remote here, I'm going to touch the details tab on the remote, and I can pull that down. So if I'm the technician on the remote end out at the faceplate, I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm going to go down and I'm going to look at that RL locator. And I can see from the remote end, we can see a larger spike at that near end. So if I clicked right on that, it's going to put it right out at about 2 meters, which is the length of the patch cord that's coming out of the top of this remote unit. So I know that issue is right there at that jack. And I can click on it from my main unit here, and I can see that, yeah, it's out at the other end of the cable. We can also drill down into the pair detail here. So if we wanted to look at individual pairs, we can go ahead and figure out which pairs might be problematic. We look at 1 and 2, yeah, it's got a pretty big spike. Same type of information we can find on the next locator for our crosstalk. So I'll look at this from both ends, and the technician on the remote end sees a large spike at the far end, probably about 90 feet or so out the cable. And here at my main, I can see that my crosstalk is right here at my main end. So it's right at that first jack. In this case, I happen to know that I untwisted the pairs a little bit. So that's what's causing this crosstalk issue. But the point is that whether you're on the remote or the main end, you can see this information. If your Certifier remote unit just has LEDs on it, you can't get this kind of information at both ends. So this helps you figure out. And again, if I'm by myself and I looked at this and I'm on the remote end and I see, okay, it's at the far end, I know I can walk back to the other end and fix it before I move on. So that'll help you identify that instead of having to walk back and only to discover, oh, guess what, it was closer to me all the time. So that allows you to figure that out early on. So that's the certification part of it. And again, multifunction, there's more stuff built into here. Other certifiers have some of these features, being able to do length and NVP tests, tone generator functions. Most testers should have those type of things built into them. One thing, again, we saw this test run in 6 seconds, and we'll go back to a link here because I do want to show you something in that 6 seconds. It's not just the Cat 6A test that I run. Yeah, I set this to Cat 6A, but I'm also testing other parameters here. So in the 6 seconds, we also get the details under resistance. Whoops, let's run another test here. Under the resistance details, we get the DC resistance unbalance, both in pair and pair to pair. And we'll go back up to our resistance. And so if we go to DC resistance, we show you loop resistance, which for a 6A test is required. But we're also running that unbalanced in pair and unbalanced pair to pair in that same 6 seconds. Now, in this case, it didn't give us a pass or fail because we're just running a 6A. We're not running the 6A++ test. If we were, it would weigh these against pass fail. And I did see some in the in pair right here that would have given us some problems. So in this case, this cable was going to have some issues on 3, 6, and 4, and 5 here for that unbalanced in pair. And if we had checked that, it would give us a pass or a fail. Checking that does not add any more time to this test. It's still going to be a 6-second auto test, unlike some of the others that you might see out there that are going to creep up to around that 18, 19-second mark. So that's the certification part of the multifunction. Now, for the next part, I won't even need my remotes. They can just sit here, and I can leave those on the screen. But what I'm going to do with my main unit, I'm going to hit my home button, and I'm going to switch ports on my main unit. And I'm going to go into my PoE and multi-gig test. I'm going to move this one remote out of the way so I can get to my PoE link over here. And I'm going to go ahead first, and I'm going to connect to this port coming out of my PoE injector. And we'll see if we can get some power reading here once I switch to the correct port on my main unit. And so here we go. I haven't changed any adapter on my main. This is the same ADNet cable adapter, the ones that you see in the top of these units that have 2 RJ45s and a couple banana jacks. Those banana jacks are used for an external load PoE test that you can do if you have, say, an intermittent PoE issue. You're trying to figure out what's going on with it. You can run a test over time under a specific load using an external load box. The 2 RJ45 jacks on top of there, one is a channel test port that we were just using. The other one is the multi-gig and PoE port that I'm connected to right now. When we see our PoE is discovered, yeah, we found the PSE. We've got, we're set for 90 watts. We can also look at 15 or 30 or 60 watt UPoE. We see the class, we see the PSE type. We've got PoE on all 4 pairs. Showing allocated power 71 watts, which is good info. That's what the switch is telling us it can give us over a good link. What we're actually getting is 73 watts. And I'm getting more than that allocated power because I've just got a short cord here running into my PoE injector. Over a regular link, you'd see some difference there. And then that external button there is for our external load. Beyond this, we can go back to the home screen and we can go in and run our multi-gig. And again, we haven't changed adapters. This is the same tester. I've got an SNR test here, and we can run this all the way up to 10 gig, and it will allow us to run a connection speed test. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we can connect at 100 meg. We're going to make sure we can connect at 1 gig. So we'll make sure that that's happening. We'll do the same test for 2.5. We're going to do the same test for 5, and we're going to do the same test for 10 gig. And we can select any or all of those. So if you don't have all of those, you can speed the test up by deselecting the ones that you don't need. It's also going to measure signal to noise ratio at 2.5, at 5, and at 10. And we add those stops because it's not simply enough to just test 10 gig and assume that everything below that will be fine. Just because it passes 10 gig doesn't mean that everything else below that's going to be okay. So you want to test it at the 2.5 and 5, especially since those speeds are being used frequently now for wireless access points. So you want to be able to test at those different speeds. And what we're doing is we're injecting traffic. So we're putting traffic on there. We're demanding PoE load at the same time we put the traffic load on there. And we're measuring the signal to noise ratio. So we know how strong that traffic signal is, and we are measuring that noise and doing a comparison, and we want to see a good SNR value. So you want something, you know, if I've got my limit set to 0, which that's customizable, you want something that's much higher than 0. Typically on 10 gig, you want to see 3 dB or greater. The higher the number, the better in this case. And if one of these had been problematic, you could examine it by pair to see if one of the pairs on your cable was causing an issue. And then we also do the 100 meg and 1 gig connection test. And then we've got our PoE test. And this was already saved with the autosave function turned on. Beyond that, again, not changing adapters. I'm going to unplug from here, hit my home button, and I'm just going to connect right into my home network. And I'm going to go into network test and cloud functionality. The cloud is one of the methods of getting the tests uploaded. You can do it via cloud, via thumb drive, or via direct connection. I can go into network tests, and in network tests is where we find some of the additional features that we're talking about. Again, this whole multifunction thing. We're going to be able to look at the network. We're going to see what's going on in this network as far as, what devices that we've got on here. We can click on discover devices. We can see the MAC and the IP addresses. We can resolve host names in here. We can click on any of those devices and find out how many network hops away they are. I can click on the icon of the TestPro, and it will show me details about the network, my DNS, DHCP, the network speed, what duplex. I can go beyond this with the switch detail, and we can look at the switch, and we're going to see what port are we connected on the switch, what VLAN are we connected to on the switch, what's the switch name, what's the make and model of the switch, what's the port capabilities. These are all important things if you're trying to help troubleshoot. Maybe somebody's having a problem connecting to the LAN or getting out to the internet, and it turns out, oh, we're on VLAN 6. We need to be on VLAN 1 because VLAN 6 is internal. Also, we can see what port. So maybe they're in the wrong port and they need to be on a different port on that switch, or even on a different switch. So these are all the kind of things that you can get in the network test functionality, along with some other tools in here where we'll allow you to do ping and trace route. Yeah, everybody probably knows Facebook went down for a while yesterday. There were people putting all kinds of rumors about. I jumped on and I did a trace route at one point during the day, and I was able to get to Facebook with a trace route. So I don't know what else was going on, but you've got that built in here. So if you're having a problem, you can figure out where the slowdown is. Is it one of my own servers or is it outside my network? TCP Connect, VLAN Discovery, a lot of other tools in here. And I know we're getting close to the end of our 30 minutes here, but I wanted to make sure that you could see when we're talking about multifunction certifier, there's a whole lot that goes into multifunction. I'm going to just real quickly take out my adapter, my network adapter, and I'm going to plug in my fiber adapter into my main.
And while you're doing that, Steve, one thing I want to note, we can also do the Wi-Fi testing and discovery, SSIDs, signal strength, all sorts of stuff in there. We can't demo it because you have to plug in a little Etamax dual band adapter into the USB port on the side of the tester. And Steve is using that port right now to be able to share the display of the tester on the screen so you can see what he's doing. But on that screen where he pulled up and clicked on network test, if you had the Wi-Fi adapter in, you could click on Wi-Fi and then go into Wi-Fi testing.
Yep, exactly. So, this, I've just gone into my fiber test here. In the fiber test, you've got some other tools in there, VFL built in, standalone light source power meter, fiber inspection scope that plugs into the USB port. So all that's, built in. And again, this is hot swappable. I didn't have to power my unit down. I just took my adapter out, plugged it in. All part of the multifunction. It doesn't do you any good if you have to keep powering your unit down every time you want to swap a module out. So, that's another, part of that multifunction. So as more things develop, we'll probably have even modules, adapters that'll plug into this that we haven't even thought of right now, or at least Lisa and I haven't thought of. Our engineers are pretty innovative, and they're probably thinking well beyond the scope of what Lisa and I are into yet.
Yeah, for sure.
I know that I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my camera here.
Yeah, we do have a couple questions in the queue, and Steve, I think you actually answered them. So, okay. Armin, you put in 2 questions. We appreciate both of them. One of them, do we have any certification products in AEM that do reporting format testing with fault standards like nearing crosstalk, power sum max, return loss? And I think you saw, we answered that. Yes, we've got that.
Yep, that's all on that auto test that we ran.
Yeah, and then he says, is there any possibility to analyze the test summary like a graph?
Yes.
And then you also showed that we could do that. And also in the test reports, whether you're uploading your reports to our Test Data Pro cloud or using our Test Data Pro PC-based software, which by the way is included, there's also graphs that show in those printed PDF reports.
And I can bring that up real quick. If Jacqueline wants to share my screen here, I will See if I've got a test in here that we can look at real quick. Here's a Cat6a channel, and I'll just pull up the graphs. So you can get these graphs. We saw the graphs on the tester, but also you get the same kind of information in the software. So we can look at all of these graphs in the software as well.
And then on the PDF report, different, I don't know if the graphs are completely identical.
Some of the graphs you'll see are the same on the PDF reports. So as we go down to the bottom of the report, you'll see the insertion loss, return loss, crosstalk, TCL, ACRF, ACRN. And then at the bottom, we show you that your cable's capable of running up to 10 gig based on this 6A test.
Okay. And Armin, you're very welcome. Thanks for the questions.
Any other questions we had?
There are no other questions. One thing, maybe just note, our network service assistant is also modular in nature. So, you know, as we add things to either product, you know, you're going to be able to take advantage of those technologies through a software update, possibly adding a module, depends on what we're doing. The other thing, Steve, I just thought of to note is that you know, one thing I've noticed with some competitive products when it comes to swapping out modules and changing functionality, it's only certain test platforms work with certain modules and adapters.
Right.
And we have one test platform. So any of our adapters, and it doesn't matter how you initially buy into TestPro, all of our adapters are compatible. So
yeah,
one platform, yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I'd point out real quickly here, because I know we're at the end of the time slot, is that I was showing you 3 remotes and a main. So that was 2 test systems. And a lot of people might go, oh, that's going to be really expensive to deploy 2 testers.
Good point.
You can deploy 2 of these copper certification testers for what you would expect to pay for 1. So,
some of the competitors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
2 for the price of 1, basically.
Yep.
You know what? There's still some questions coming in. So I say let's continue on and answer these questions.
Sure.
How many tests can we store on the device based on category? How many, for example, Cat6a can we store?
10,000 tests. And the reality is nobody's really going to keep 10,000 tests on there.
Right.
Because once you're done with the project and you've offloaded them and you've got the copies on your computer, you're going to eliminate that project. You're just going to delete it from the unit, and you know, to make room for another project. But you can store 10,000 tests on the unit.
Yep. And then keep in mind that when you're on site, if you have the ability to click into a wired network port, you could upload to either PC or cloud. But remember, it's got Wi-Fi capability. So while you're testing, you can be uploading to the cloud while you're testing.
Yep.
So, and then there's some other methods to get the test results off the tester, but keep that in mind. Let's see. I think that's it. And I do see the request in there for our email addresses, and we will be sure to get those to you. I think that's it, Steve.
All righty. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you tuning in, and look forward to seeing you next Tuesday on episode 11.
Thanks.